Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me.
But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram and YouTube. Really happy to have you here. Welcome to this very special episode of the Marathon Podcast, the first ever episode of the Boston series. That will be a regular series that will be here on the podcast where I will update you guys on things that you need to know about the Boston Marathon. We'll have runners on who have done well in the Boston and run it before. And today we're going to go through some of the questions that you guys have had for me, some of the questions that I've seen out there, and also just in general, how to best prepare for the Boston Marathon in terms of logistics, in terms of your training, and also things that I was curious about before my first Boston Marathon and the things that I learned. If you are listening to this, chances are that you are preparing for your next Boston Marathon. Maybe it's your first. If it is, congratulations on getting in. And if it's not, you might just want to kind of refresh your memory in terms of what you need to know before this amazing marathon experience. I think that to a lot of people, it feels a bit intimidating because it feels like a very important marathon. You know that there are a lot of logistics going into this, and it was probably hard enough to even understand how to get in. If you are wondering how you can get into the Boston Marathon, how you can qualify for the Boston Marathon, say 2027 or later, I recommend listening to one of the previous episodes that I made on the new guidelines or the new qualification rules, qualification criteria that the Boston Marathon released last year, especially now that they have new rules for net downhill courses. This episode is for those who are preparing for the marathon itself. So everyone who are already qualified, who already got a spot and a bib for the Boston Marathon. We are today about exactly 3 months out from the Boston Marathon 2026. And I am super excited, super stoked to go back to Boston, out to Hopkinton, and race what I think is the greatest sporting event in the whole world. Honestly, that experience last year was just amazing. I did a full recap of that a year ago. So one of the episodes from April 2025 is all about that experience. We're definitely going to touch on some of these things today, but if you want to just have the full recap, you can go back and listen to that. Before we dive into this Boston Marathon special, there are a couple of things that I want to mention. One of them is the hat that I'm wearing. I'm finally able to say that the marathon hat is available for everyone on the marathonpodcast.com. I now have a white version as well. Really happy about that one. Maybe that is my favorite, actually. I might like this or prefer this one over the black one, but really happy to have a black and a white version. And really excited to say that the profit that I'm making, whatever I'm making on these first 300 hats, will go directly to the Marathon Podcast sponsorship, which is an initiative supporting non-professional athletes who are really ambitious, putting in a lot of work, and people that I think that deserve a little bit more help or support with their running. So that is one thing that I want to touch on. The other one, and I was scrolling through Instagram yesterday, and on Instagram, all of a sudden, I saw that one of my previous guests, she was outed by this one Instagram profile. You might have seen them, official, unofficial time. And I'm just going to read what it says in their bio just to kind of say what their mission is. Protecting the integrity of the marathon, upholding chip times, exposing Strava inflation. And I've been following this channel for a while. I'm not anymore, honestly, because of what I'm just gonna share. Um, they have this thing where they are outing people who are kind of claiming a better time than they actually had. Say that they're claiming their Strava time, or they stopped their watch earlier and they're saying that that is the marathon time. I've been kind of going back and forth in my head of like, is this a good thing? Are they just creating more, I don't know, more bad stuff than they're serving good stuff? And it's been kind of hard to figure out what I think about it until yesterday when Cara Dudley, who visited the Marathon podcast a few months ago, she was outed by this profile. What they said was that her marathon time that she has on her profile that she's been talking about, which is a 2:49 marathon at the Sydney Marathon 2025, did not match her official time, which was 2:50:01. And yes, her time, official time in the results, it's 2:50:01. But Kara was a part of a sub elite group, I think it was. And so her chip time was actually 2:49. And she got this proof from Sydney Marathon and like in an email saying that your chip time is this. And she's been very transparent with her community, with all of us. She was talking about this on the podcast, and she's not tried to hide the fact that she thinks of her chip time, which is what all of us are usually using when we are talking about our times. Her chip time was 2:49, which to her feels like it is her personal record. I totally agree with Kara. I do feel like if I disagree with that, that would be kind of my problem. But in terms of protecting the integrity of the marathon, upholding chip times, which is what official unofficial time says that it's all about, Kara is referring to her chip time. And the argument from official unofficial time is that her marathon time, because she was in a sub elite group or elite group, she got a lot of benefits from that. And with that, she has to kind of consider that official time her time. And we can discuss this forever. The point is that Kara was super transparent about all of this. And so to me, this profile kind of just lost all its credibility because I now don't know if I can trust them. I feel like they've been kind of putting themselves above everyone else and arguing things that I don't know if it serves the community. I don't see who it actually serves other than kind of just spreading more hate or cruel things in that nice running community that we have. I don't know what your take is on this, but I just feel like in the running community, we should be better at, or we are already really good at cheering each other on. And I think that that should be our main focus, not trying to tear each other down or make each other's performances um, worse. And also, I think that it's important to emphasize that the difference in time from her chip time and the official time is just like a couple of seconds. So it doesn't really matter anyways. It's not like she's claiming minutes. It's just a tiny bit of a difference. And she has the email, the screenshot. It's on her profile. And I just think that at least to me, that is more than enough. And I don't need to question that. And if I was questioning that, I would consider that my problem, not Kara's problem. So just wanted to quickly touch on that because I I'm not usually that provoked by things, but seeing that and seeing someone that I know put a lot of effort and pride into her running, it just really bothered me. So I'm not following this account anymore. I don't feel like it has any credibility. And I know that this is not something that I've ever brought on or brought up on the podcast before. It might be an unpopular opinion, but I just wanted to touch on that and also make you aware that you should be a bit more or maybe should be more critical to the things that this profile is sharing, because I thought that I could trust that profile, but seeing now that the kind of the rules for who they are attacking kind of just changed. And even when she was asked to show proof of the chip time, she provided that chip time, and still it was not good enough for this profile. So yeah, that's just something that I've been thinking about since yesterday, and I really wanted to just bring that up before we dive into today's conversation. Another thing is that I want to just quickly let you know what you can expect from this podcast later on in this week. We have Cat Hole McCarran on Wednesday. Such a good chat. I was telling him after that, sometimes I'm sitting with a feeling that I just want everyone to listen to this. Cat Hole is such a smart runner, 227 marathoner. He's been running for just like less than 2 years. His dad was like a semi-professional runner, and I took his advice today on my like mid long run, like, and I was running much slower than I have done previously, and I can really tell that that workout, that run, was very beneficial to me in terms of that pace and making sure that I'm not going as fast as I have been. Because yes, my capacity is good, but I should still be good at those easy runs. And I've been preaching this, and I still feel like over the holidays, over the last few weeks, I've been kind of just not done that as well as I would want to. So that's on Wednesday. And on Friday, if everything goes according to plan, I'm going to have a chat with Alfie Manthorpe. I'm talking to him later today. And he is such a fast runner. I've been following him for a very long time, and we've been chatting. And I've been wanting to have him on the podcast since the very beginning. And I'm very excited to talk to him. He hasn't done a marathon yet, as far as I know, but he is definitely one to look out for when it comes to that distance. I'm also going to have Felicia Pasadin back on. She was like a big hit, one of the most popular episodes ever on the podcast. That's going to be next week. We're going to talk about how it's been since that last episode, because I know that things really has changed for her. I know that she's going through a little bit of an injury right now, but still excited to talk to her about that. Okay, we're 10-15 minutes into this episode and we haven't started talking about the Boston Marathon, but we are. And just like as a part of that, I guess you are logging your training somehow. And for me, the best way to see my progress over, like if I look back at my last 3 years of running, I would say that Strava has been like that one platform that I've been able to use to compare myself to previous effort. I'm able to look up my last fast long run, or where I was at in terms of my heart rate, whatever. You know how good Strava is. And I am so happy and so proud to be one of the first podcasts to partner up with Strava. And you can get 20% off an annual subscription by using the code Christian. Just check the show notes to see how you spell that. And yeah, very happy to be able to provide you guys with a 20% discount on that annual subscription. Okay, Boston Marathon, the oldest marathon in the world, and such an amazing experience. We, or I have talked quite a lot about the Boston Marathon on this podcast already. And I guess that is what, like, the reason why is that it meant so much to me when I first started running. That was my first goal, to kind of qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I was so excited before the Boston Marathon last year. Although I was struggling with injuries, I tried to prepare as well as I could. And getting to that, out to Hopkinton on Marathon Monday, honestly, just being there in my corral, like on the start of one of the biggest marathons in the world, maybe the biggest, or like at least most prestigious marathons in the world, was just unreal. And if you are running this year, or if you are planning on running, and if you have done a qualifying time already, I'm so excited for you. Really hope that you'll get the same experience as I did. And today, as I said in the intro, we're gonna prepare you guys, or try to prepare you for what you have in store. Because there are a few things that are different about the Boston Marathon compared to a lot of the other marathons that you will run, whether that is like majors or other marathons. So thought I would just quickly go through some things that you might already know, but some things that I think that a lot of people might forget or might not even think about. So, first of all, Boston Marathon is a point to point marathon, which means that we're driving 42.2 or 20 kilometers or 26.2 kilometers, or sorry, miles out of Boston out to a little town called Hopkinton. And then we're just running back. You barely make any turns. There are, I think I counted like four of them or something like that. And you're just kind of running straight the whole way, which might sound amazing, right? The good thing about this is that if you have tailwind on the day of the marathon, it's gonna make you run faster. But if you have headwind, you will have that wind in your face the whole run, the whole race, because you're just running in one direction. Also, the Boston Marathon, it's based in it's obviously in Boston, New England. New England in April is not very predictable when it comes to weather. So the last couple of years, it's been pretty nice weather. In 2024, it was pretty hot. 2025, I think it was pretty ideal. I know that some people thought it was a bit too hot at the end, but I thought it was pretty good. 2018 is like, if you look it up, this is like one of the marathons where the weather was just awful. Like 0 degrees Celsius, 34 Fahrenheit, pouring down, and just miserable. That is not what I'm picturing in my head when I'm thinking about the Boston Marathon that I'm going to do in a few months' time. And so I'm trying to tell myself or prepare myself on the fact that we could potentially have crazy weather, and we could have this, like what I call Norwegian spring, fall, even Norwegian summers, right? Like you would think that as a Norwegian, I'm used to that kind of weather and prepared for it, but I'm not. Like, I still have to mentally prepare for that. And obviously, fingers crossed, it will be kind of like it was in 2025, where it was pretty perfect. And but that is still something that I think that people need to just consider. So if you're not familiar with this, like obviously if you're American or if you grew up on the East Coast of the US, you know what New England weather is like. If you are from other parts of the world, you might not really have a relationship to this. And I think that it's kind of nice to already now start thinking that, okay, we could potentially face this kind of weather. Like it could be that that short pair of shorts or that singlet or t-shirt that you're planning on wearing might end up being long sleeve, or maybe even long leggings if it's super cold. I don't know what you like racing in, but there is potentially a chance that you're gonna face something that is not as nice as we're obviously hoping for. Another thing about the Boston Marathon, and we're gonna talk more about this, and that's like the logistics of it, especially in the morning of the marathon, because when driving out, or when, because the start is so far from Boston, you are most likely staying somewhere else than close to the start, because this is a little town. Hopkinton is not a big place, and most likely most of the Airbnbs close to the start are already sold out. But honestly, it's not always even an advantage or beneficial to stay too close to the start line, because it's not that easy to get there. But most of the runners will take buses from Boston out to Hopkinton. And that is like super early in the morning. Race starts this year, I think, was about 10, around 10:30 for my corral. And the thing is that taking those buses out might affect what your like optimal build up on the day or preparations on the day, because as we all know, preparing for a race, a marathon, is hard enough without having to deal with a lot of logistics like that. But there are buses going out to Hopkinton. I'm going to get back to the times for that so you can be prepared for it. Just know that you will get a lot of information about this. You won't have to panic about this just in the morning after race. But these are things that are nice to just consider. There are also other options, which I'm also going to touch on when we get to some of the questions that you had for me on the Boston Marathon. But I think that these are still like nice things to consider and maybe start like reflecting on already now, just so you can feel more comfortable. I don't know about you, but for me, I think that it's always nice to just know a little bit beforehand what I am heading into, what to expect, what to like prepare for in terms of just the logistics of the race itself. Another thing to be aware of with the Boston Marathon is that this is a net downhill course, but don't let that fool you, because there are hills, and the first part of the Boston Marathon is downhill, which a lot of people, I already have some questions about this, and I'm gonna get back to that. But that means that you need to be prepared for that. And there are also some hills from about 16 to 21 miles. And that is also important for you to just be aware of and train for. And so that is kind of what makes the Boston Marathon so notorious, that at this point of the race, we get those hills. And I know a lot of people have questions about it. And honestly, I don't think that you have to overthink it as much as I did, and maybe not even as much as most people are. And that might be controversial. I'm sure some people are listening to this and they're like, no, you really need to prepare for it. And they might be right too. But I'm going to explain later on why I think that is. And so with that little introduction, some of the things that I think that like when I'm asked about the Boston Marathon, I will talk about these things. With that, I think that it's time to get to some of the questions that you guys had, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can, because I know that there will be different answers, different opinions about these things, but at least these are the things that I've taken away, the things that I've learned after doing so much research on the Boston Marathon, but also running it myself. So, the first question, and that has actually nothing to do with the running part, but this might be for your family, friends, whoever is watching you, and that's like best place for supporters to watch on course. And I've gotten this question several times, and I've tried to kind of answer this the best way I can. And we tried to do as much research as possible on this last year. So my fiance is from like 40, actually, the distance between Boston and Hopkinton, that is where my fiance is from, just like in a different direction, different little town. And so she did some research, her mom did some research, and we really tried to figure out a way where they could watch me twice. And I've heard about people being able to watch their friends or family a couple of times during the marathon. But if you really want to get a spot and be sure to see your runner like in that on Boylston Street, crossing that finish line, it might be hard or risky to try to be anywhere else on the course. I think that it's also important to kind of just consider how fast that person is running. Obviously, there's a difference between someone running a 2:30 marathon and someone running like a 5:30 marathon, just because it will give them more time to move. there is also like there is such a big difference between moving from, say, Framingham, which is one of the little towns that you'll run through pretty early on in the race, like moving from there to Boston City on a normal Wednesday compared to Marathon Monday. Roads are closed off. It's really hard to find parking. It's really hard to even get anywhere by car. They will close off so many of the roads for security reasons, for logistics. And what that means is that it's gonna be pretty hard to move around by car. And obviously, you probably won't run as fast as your runner, so you can't really run along, and you can definitely not enter the course. And so, one of the only options you'll have will be to do the take the train. And the thing about that is that yes, you can try, and again, depending on how fast you're the runner that you're watching us or tracking, I think that it can still be risky. At least that's what we found, that even if they were in one of those first little towns and saw me there, it would still be hard for them to manage to get back into Boston. I think that the train is the best option, but then again, it might be hard to find a spot on Boylston Street because it's going to be crowded, a lot of people. And so, my best advice in a lot of ways is to maybe just prioritize one spot and maximum two. Another option is obviously to try to figure out how to get to, like, not, you can't, it's really hard to get to Hopkinton. So, like, to get as close to the start line as possible. So you see a runner within, like, say, the first 10 minutes or so, and then just get in the car from somewhere and get into Boston. I think that, at least for us, I was interested in having my family watching me a couple of times. I was saying that my dad is here. I really want him to be able to watch me, but we kind of figured that it was better to just prioritize him and all of them seeing me at the finish line. And I think that was worth it. So, my best take is actually just to prioritize that one spot if it is the finish line. I think that it might be easier if you're not obsessed with the finish line, because then you could potentially take the train and just prioritize a couple of places throughout the course. I hope that was a decent answer. I think that the more local you are, the better you will be at this. And I also am sure that some people are able to find better solutions, but just know that security is priority for everyone in Boston on this day. It will be hard, and I think that you can't really consider this like a marathon where it's easy to be a spectator and see your runner several times. The next question that comes to the training, the best way to train for the course. This is a very good question. I think that, at least my experience after last year's Boston Marathon, was that I was overthinking this. That does not mean that you shouldn't train a bit different, like that your training shouldn't look a bit different when it comes to the Boston Marathon, say compared to London Marathon or Berlin Marathon or Tokyo Marathon, where it's more flat. The reason why I'm saying that you should train a bit differently is that there will be more hills, and you have that downhill section in the beginning. And for me, I would say that I would personally, I would prioritize downhill training rather than the uphill part. I'm sure some people will again disagree with me on this, but looking back, I would say that the one thing that, like, kind of affected my race the most was the fact that I started a bit too hard. Like, I was carried away, or got carried away with the people, the adrenaline, how easy it was for those first um, 3 to 5 miles. And I just really wish that I listened to everyone who told me to not try to bank time, and I didn't. So I still went a bit too hard or too fast. And so if I was training more on this or practicing this more, I think that I would have learned more or seen the effects of it. So I think that maybe a good way to do it, and I actually do have an option of doing that, or there's a great hill just close to me here where I can start my runs with that downhill, and there will be like 3 to 4K of downhill running. And with that, I might be able to actually prepare for the downhill sections. And I could start like that, run a bit faster, and just see how that affects my legs. Because obviously, there are some of us who are, or not me apparently, but some people are more like better downhill runners. Some people are not really good downhill runners. And you also have to take that into consideration when thinking about where or like how fast to go in the beginning. But I'm also living in Norway. We have hills everywhere. And I've been talking to some of, say, the Florida runners who don't really have hills. And so when I'm saying that I would prioritize the downhill more, I guess that also comes from a place where I have hill training kind of like on all of my runs. Not necessarily high intensity, but I have to face a hill wherever I go, just like 2 minutes that way, I will have a hill. 2 minutes that way, I will have a hill. I'm gonna face hills on all of my runs, and that I guess like makes it a bit different. But this is also where I guess I was the most surprised, and I think it's maybe now it's nice to touch on the part of the hills. I remember thinking about the hills in a way where I was like, this is going to be so hard. They're going to be so rough. And I don't even have any hills close to me that I can practice. So I remember like maybe a month before the race, we were at a cabin trip, and there was this like big steep hill. It's like a mountain, really, really hard. Actually, the Norseman, which is one of the hardest Ironmans in the world, that ends on top of that mountain. And I remember jogging up there, being like, this is great training for the Boston Marathon. You could obviously argue that I hadn't done my research well enough, but I felt like everyone talked about these hills. And so I really wanted to come prepared. But going, or like when I got to the hills, first of all, when I drove through them before the race, but also throughout, like during the race, I kind of realized that, well, these hills are not that hard by themselves. It's not like they're super steep, not even super long, any of them. The problem is where they are placed. Because when you get to 16 miles, you've been running for a while, you're tired, and you don't really feel like facing these hills in there. And so, just to be clear, there are like a lot of people talk about it as if it's one hill. It's not. I guess it's like three, you could argue four. And at least for me, when I got to them, I was like, these are not that challenging. Again, it's more where they are. And I think that in terms of how to train for the Boston Marathon, if we're going back to the original question, I would say that it also really depends on your ambitions. Because for me last year, I headed into the race with less mileage than I wanted to. I wasn't sure if I was going to even be able to do a sub 3 marathon. Just for reference, I ended up doing a 2:53. But when getting to those hills, I was not thinking that I'm going to kill these hills. I'm going to attack them so hard. I was like, let's aim at not losing too much time. And honestly, I think that that is a great strategy for just about anyone, just because you will probably lose more than you'll gain if you push yourself too much, and then you end up like um, getting too tired, too exhausted just by because you were pushing yourself too much in the hills. But for me, in terms of execution, I feel like a lot of people neglect that part that is between that downhill section in the beginning and those hills at between 16 and 21 miles, because the thing is that you're actually able to run fairly fast for most of the course because it's so flat. And so, just to like quickly talk about my strategy for the 2026 marathon is to stay exactly on my pace, that I'm my target pace, which will be around 6 minutes per mile or 3:45 in the first downhill section, and then try to stay at the same pace when I get down to the bottom of the hill. And then when I get to the like 16 miles and I start climbing a little bit, I will probably allow myself to go up to maybe like four, maybe 6:20, 6:30, just because they're not that long. And I would much rather just have that energy and then again try to save as much energy as possible after each hill. And when because after each hill it goes a little bit downhill again and you get to rest a little bit and you can try to get your heart rate down, catch your breath, and then you get a new hill. So honestly, it's kind of like repeats or intervals, and I appreciate, or I like that, because I know that when I'm getting to the top, I'm gonna get some time to recover, but also trying to make sure that I won't get into that red zone, as like I usually call it, like uh, overdoing it so that I am dead when I get to the top of Heartbreak Hill at 21 miles, because I still have 5 miles left, and I know that I need that energy. And last time I was so tired when I got to the top of those hills, just because the whole race ended up being so tired, like so hard. And obviously, this is where the marathon gets hard in the first place. But just make sure that you have enough energy when you start climbing those hills. And so that is obviously about the execution. I haven't really answered the question in terms of training, but this was just like a long monologue on why I think that, at least for me, I would rather work on those downhill sections than the hill training, especially from Norway, having a lot of hills. I think that if you don't have a lot of hills, you should probably try to find some hills somewhere and try to work on both. And if you don't have any hills and you don't have the option of going anywhere, try to find a treadmill where you can at least get some incline, maybe even some decline. I also think that a great way to work on your downhill training is just to focus more on your strength training, your quads. Make sure that your legs, your knees, all of it is like, and your muscles are strong enough to handle that downhill section, because it is going to be a bit harder running at that pace. I don't think they're very steep, but it's just like running at that pace downhill. It's going to be a different load on your muscles, and you do want to come prepared for that. So, main takeaways from this is like, make sure that you're familiar with downhill running and a bit more strength training. And other than that, I wouldn't say that the Boston Marathon uh really stands out from other marathons in terms of your training. At least that's my opinion on this. I also do know that some of the runners that I've had on the podcast, they have decided or chosen to kind of simulate those hills that you'll meet in the middle of the marathon by doing a long run and running with a lot of fatigue into hills and ending their long runs with some hills, just to simulate and try to get that feeling that you'll get when hitting the hills at the Boston Marathon. I hope that was a good enough answer on how to train for the course. The next one is race day advice, transportation tips, navigating the city on race day, please. So, this is kind of a hard question to answer without knowing where you're staying. And I think that it all depends on where in the city you're staying, when you're getting into the city, like what you want to do. I think that on race day itself, in terms of being able to get to the buses, I think that it's convenient the closer you are staying to the place where they're picking you up. And so I have here the guide that we got last year for the Boston Marathon, transportation to the start, and the thing is that for these hills, sorry, for the race itself, depending on what wave or corral you're in, you have to get up pretty early. You need to make sure that you've given all of your, like, that you have all your stuff ready to give to the people, like, so that it will be transported to the finish line. You'll get like this transparent bag that you can bring with you to hand to them, because you will have to have a transparent bag with all of your stuff after the race. But one of the most important things will obviously be to be ready early. I would not want to be late for the bus and be stressed out in the morning. And so in terms of the transportation to the start, you will see that just next to Boston Common and Public Garden, and also very close to the finish line in a lot of ways, like close to or on Boston Street. You will have the gear check, and you will have the buses loading. And so bus loading is at 6:45 for wave one. And okay, this is from last year, so it could be that you will get a new one. But and I'm not even going to go through this because you don't need the specifics yet. You will get this participants guide before you start the race. It has a very clear map on where everything happens. It will be super easy for you to figure this out. It could obviously be that there are changes for this year's marathon. It might be that the bus is loading in a different place, which means that it isn't even useful if I'm detailing this. So I'm not going to kind of like give you any information on all of those things, but can tell you that, and most likely it will be like this next year too, is that you have the finish line and then you just keep on walking down Boston Street, and there you will have the gear check. So it shouldn't be too hard to find. Again, super early in the morning, there are going to be thousands of runners doing the same thing as you. So I'm sure you can also just follow the crowd in a lot of ways. So anyways, I think that on race day, I would say do the things that you need to do, do the things that you feel like are important to you for the race, in terms of doing a good race, in terms of executing the way you want to. And then I'm talking about like food wise, sleeping, but also make sure that you don't have to stress in the morning. So be a few minutes early to the gear check and bus loading. And again, back to what I was saying earlier, Boston, there are a lot of logistics, and it's gonna be a bit hard for you in terms of getting ready for that bus. You need to get up much earlier than you would normally, especially for a 10:30 start. I mean, if you are used to races starting at 7 a.m., you might be still able to get, or used to getting up early. The big difference is that the time between you eating breakfast at your hotel and the start is, it's so long. And so it might be harder to like to work around that, but I really recommend trying to also here simulate that in training. Before, obviously you don't have to simulate the bus stuff, but have breakfast and then kind of make sure that, okay, you know that I have to get up at say 4 a.m. because the bus is loading at 6:45. You need to be there around 6 maybe, and you want to have some time and you want to go to the bathroom, do all of the stuff that you need to do, and then go for a run at 10:30 and see what is that you need nutrition wise in between there. There is also an option of being dropped off at a drop off point not too far from Athletes Village. That is what I did. That actually meant that we didn't have to leave the house until 7:15, which was very convenient. I did not have that stressful experience that a lot of people are talking about. But then again, like the one thing that I'm missing out by doing that is that I don't get that social part of getting on the bus and talking to a lot of people. I know that people made like lifelong friends just on that bus. So that is something to just consider, that if you're there for the experience and not only, and you're not trying to really race it, I would definitely recommend doing the buses. I'm kind of bummed out or sad that I didn't do that last year, and I'm not going to do it this year either, because I'm going to try to run as fast as I can. And I believe that it's better for me to just get straight to that drop off point, which is 10 minutes from Athletes Village. So that is the transportation on race day. In terms of navigating the city, if you are new to Boston, Boston is fairly easy to navigate, I would say. And on race day, it's also fairly, I would say, simple to just walk around. Yes, a lot of people, very crowded, but also doesn't feel so crowded that it's hard to get to places. And so I do recommend walking or taking the T on race day. So if you are outside of the city, staying further out, like Cambridge, Brookline, whatever, try to get into the city using the T if possible, if that is like close to you, or maybe like using a city bike or just walking if that's possible. I think that it's not a great idea to take a car or an Uber, because it might be more unpredictable. At least it's really hard for me to say anything about that. So, in terms of the logistics, and I find this one to be kind of hard to answer on the race day itself, because I would say that the most important thing you can do is just get to that gear check and get on the bus. And those things will be fairly easy. It will probably be a lot of people, and that might stress you out if that is something that usually stresses you out. But other than that, I'd say that it's easy to get around on your feet, and race day will probably be maybe the easiest way to get around. And then obviously you have the days prior to that in terms of the expo and all of that. And I personally thought that the expo was perfect. It's like so easy, great with uh, great with the logistics of that. And just to quickly touch on that as well, a couple of days before, I think we went in the first day of the expo. We parked the car at Prudential Center. There's like a parking garage there, and then we just walked around everywhere. And we were able to easily walk to all of the pop ups, all of the stores, everything that was relevant to the marathon, just on that same day. So, or the day we were there. And I think that kind of is the same for the whole marathon weekend. Just also know that this is like a soft holiday in Boston and New England, and with Patriots Day. And so that might mean that there are more people in general, and just like estimate that everything will take more time. So even if your GPS tells you that something will take 10 minutes, it might take much more than that. And just be aware of that and prepare yourself for that. Next question. What are your goals and the training approach of your coach? So that is obviously easier for me to talk about, and I've been pretty open about like on my goals. I want to do a 2:38. That was my initial goal for the Boston Marathon last year, but with a year of injuries, I had to see that train leave, and now I am a 2:47 marathoner. So I still need to do I make a pretty big jump, but I still feel like I'm on the right track for that. I think that the main reason why I have a 2:38 goal is just that that is a 3:45 average pace in minutes per kilometer. And so with that, I think that the most important things thing that I have been doing now with John is obviously like build up the mileage, and I'm seeing more and more how important the mileage is for me to run even faster marathons, especially me coming from sports where I'm used to training a lot, used to my body really responding well to training and a lot of training. And so I'm tempted to say that that is the most important thing, like just that building up that mileage. But then we have a lot of different things coming or like also affecting this marathon block. One of them is that I'm running Tokyo Marathon on March 1st. I got a spot there. And although Boston is my main goal, I really still want to run in Tokyo. Unfortunately, that means that I can't race Tokyo fully. That does not mean that I'm not prioritizing it in terms of running a faster race than I ever have. It's more that I'm not going to go all out. So I'm really hoping that I'll still run a PR in Tokyo, but it's still going to be just a part of that build up to Boston Marathon. So that will be one of the long runs, progressive, harder long runs that I'll do. And I talked to John about it too, that it's okay to go harder at the end, but just like be very controlled for most of the race and feel good about it. And we also do want to leave that race feeling really confident when it comes to the Boston Marathon, which will be then like a month and a half ish, a bit more than that later. So that is one big thing to kind of consider. And I'm sure that in an ideal world, we wouldn't really do Tokyo Marathon that close or another marathon so close to the Boston Marathon. But I still think that uh, it can work. I'm very curious about this. I'm not sure, and I do understand if people are like, "Oh, that's probably not too smart," but that is something that we just have to do because getting that spot in Tokyo is kind of like it's so hard, and I really want to take advantage of that opportunity. The other thing that I will do is get more hours. So I'm gonna have more zone one training on my bike. And again, with John, I was asking him about this, like cross training, adding more hours, and he was totally supporting that. But he was also telling me that he really wants us to make sure that that is zone one and not like hard work, that it shouldn't affect my running or my harder workouts. So that cross training is going to be important. The other thing that I'm going to do and I need to be better at is my strength training. That goes back to the things that I talked about in terms of how to approach training to the Boston Marathon. Being better at that, I'm really hoping that I'll be able to now do like 2 to 3 strength trainings a week. That is my goal going forward. And I think that some of the things that I'm talking to Cattle about in the next episode will be essential here too. Like some of those exercises, more one leg work, and just make sure that my legs are ready for those downhill sections, but also just getting through the training. Right now, I'm very confident in my capacity, but I just need to have more strength to be able to handle where I'm at as of right now. So, all in all, like more hours, more strength training. And then living in Norway, I know that more of my work will have to be on the treadmill. And what I see as the benefit of doing that is that I'm not one of those who feel like the treadmill is easier. I know that some people do, but I feel like it's so hard. So, whatever pace I'm running on a treadmill compared to outside feels so much harder. So that was very nice last year when I was doing my threshold workouts. And then as soon as I was able to run outside, I felt like I was jogging at the same pace just because it usually felt so hard. So, one of the things that I also have to do, and I emailed them the other day, I need the sports master, the ones dealing or the ones who sold me this treadmill. I need them to come and calibrate it and check it because it does feel like it's going much faster than I then I think it is. So it could be that I'm just really bad at the treadmill, or it's not calibrated correctly, or that's just how it's gonna be. And yeah, we'll see. But that is very like, I guess that is my answer to that. I feel like John is being very good about like building me up slowly. I'm curious to see where we'll peak at. I don't really know that right now in terms of mileage, and I also know that John's philosophy is very much like, as of right now, we're just doing time on feet for the long runs. But I know that his philosophy is also a little bit like longer on the long runs. Will go harder at the end and try to simulate that, or getting more of that hard higher intensity at the end of a long run. So instead of having, say, 2.5 hours of high intensity, just at like last 20, 30 minutes, whatever, is at higher intensity. So I'll update you guys when I know more about that. I'm hoping that I can maybe get John onto at some point so we can discuss the training, what we are doing building up to Boston Marathon. Okay, so next question, and that is like, people are curious about hills and injuries, and some people might be coming in, like this person coming into the marathon with some problems with some knee issues, and trying to avoid that really intense hill work, until luckily focusing on strength training. But the question is, how essential do you think hill work is? And I think that this goes back to what I was saying before. What are your ambitions? Like, how fast are you planning on running? How much are you planning on being on your limit? Because even for me, aiming for a sub 240 marathon, which you could argue is like pretty fast. And I'm still thinking that I'm not gonna use those hills to gain much, right? Like, I'm gonna try to really run by effort and not go too hard. So I think that in terms of that hill, like uphill running, yes, it's nice to be prepared for it. If you've been running flat the whole time, it might be a shock to your legs going up there. And so, yes, then it could be nice. And I would say that, or you could argue that it's essential. But in terms of like the main focus on hill work, I would say that downhill is more important. And then obviously, if you have knee injuries or any injuries at all that you're dealing with, you could argue that downhill training is kind of hard, like not something to that is very beneficial. But again, then if you're not able to do that, I would say that strength training might be like your best friend. Prioritize that, focus more on that. And one thing that I think personally, and like, I think that doing treadmill work, like if you have a treadmill, put it on incline and just walk, that could be a great way, because you're still training your muscles to work uphill. That will obviously be less load on whatever body part is injured. You can also use the stairmaster, that will be even more of a load, maybe even more on your butt and ass muscles. Ass, is that okay to say on the podcast? I guess I can, because it's mine. But I think that that is something that I would have prioritized if you are struggling to run. And that is also something that I think that if you are in a situation where I found myself last year, where I was injured throughout the whole buildup, I did some of my runs just uphill at slow pace and on the treadmill, and it didn't really feel like I was running, but I still got more of that running specific training in without, although it wasn't with a high pace, it was just still nice to be able to run with less pain. I for me, it was like I didn't have pain when I was running uphill at that pace, and so that helped a lot. I hope that was a decent answer to that question. Then we have some more trivia questions. One of them, or actually, this is kind of the last question before a little bit of information. And That is, when do you wear your Boston Marathon gear? And this is such a funny question. I know that this has been a huge discussion. We talked about it a few episodes ago when I had the Indie Boys on. Personally, I look at myself as a Boston Marathon 2026 runner already because I qualified, I got a spot, and I'm kind of like, it's okay. In my head, it's okay for me to get the gear and to run with the gear. So I've been running with the jacket several times. I've been wearing my uh, base layer thing, or like mid layer, I guess, from Adidas a few times already. And I'm not afraid of wearing it in public or anything like that. I know that some people are very superstitious, and I know that some people are like, well, you haven't earned it until you actually done the race. I don't agree with that. I think that if you qualified, you deserve it, wear it, be proud, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't. So, yeah, I don't know. Just wear it. Those are my thoughts and opinions on that. I know that you guys probably still have a lot of questions, and there might be questions that are popping up when we get closer to the race. And these are just a few of the questions uh, that were sent to me, but I hope that these were helpful. I hope that you'll keep sending me questions. These were from like a questionnaire thing on my Instagram story, but please keep sending me some of these questions in my inbox, either to warwick.runs on Instagram, or to the Marathon Podcast on Instagram. So if you want to know more about the Boston Marathon, I'll try to include that in this series. We're going to try to stick to under 70 minutes for this episode. So I'm going to end this one here. But thank you so much for listening. Please give this podcast a review if you haven't already subscribed to the channel on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if that's where you're listening. Really, really happy to have you here. Really excited about this series with Boston, and really excited to share this experience with you guys. And again, remember, the marathon hat is for sale on marathonpodcast.com. Thank you, and I'll talk to you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wild Studio.